Like Christian, I've been a serial entrepreneur for about the last 20 years. High-end, cutting-edge, disruptive technology companies that serve both the commercial and federal sectors. And then about 8 years ago, started by accident a nonprofit that became an international science and technology think tank, where we specialized in distributed problem solving and orthogonal approaches to looking at difficult problems, starting in the US intelligence community, but then kind of moving that outward into the commercial sector. And currently we have relationships across the US and internationally to bring ecosystems of solvers together around great technologies like HeroX.
All right, so gentlemen, let's get into our questions. But before we get into specific questions, I want to learn a little bit more about your guys' journey. So I know you've both shared already a little bit in your introductions, but tell our audience, Ken, a little bit about how you became a thought leader or a subject matter expert in this space. I mean, I wouldn't imagine that it's something that you imagine that you're going to be, right? So tell us a little bit about your journey that brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you'd asked me even 15 years ago if I thought I'd be in the position I am today, I would say absolutely not. Mainly the reason why I stumbled across a lot of the things that we excel in today is perseverance. I'm a huge fan of pushing it up against the ceiling when people say that things aren't possible. I'm a huge believer in applied innovation and where that can take you. And so, a lot of my journey has been filled with typical entrepreneurial ups and downs. And you learn a lot, though. As we kind of progressed, I think it's important to just say what you feel. Never be afraid to express your opinion. And I think that's where, we've really moved ahead in terms of thinking of next generation crowdsourcing is really testing the limits of what can be done with technology today and galvanizing crowds in new ways. So, but certainly something that I was not purposely standing on a whiteboard.
So Christian, I'm sure it's much the same story for you. Tell us what makes you personally so passionate about HeroX and crowdsourcing.
There's a huge amount of almost a fetish around new technologies, AI, machine learning, robots, there's all of these things that are happening and people jump straight to the tech, almost like magical in what it does, which unfortunately almost always means that it doesn't meet the initial expectations. Behind every invention, behind every breakthrough, there's humans, a focused team of humans that have worked really hard to make that stuff work. I find the amazingness of innovation is with us, with humans, and what we're capable of. I think we should spend more time looking at the source of all of these amazing technologies and breakthroughs, which is really us as the tool makers and not the tools. Startups are great. I love them. It's my job, path I've chosen. But anybody who's actually done a startup, all the way through to a successful, the creation of a successful business, whether that's a business that keeps on running or has been sold, knows that it's at the end of the day, if you count the hours, it's probably 1% innovation and 99% execution and hard work. If startups are the only way for us to innovate, if big companies want to acquire innovation from outside, buying a startup is a really inefficient way to do that, or at the very least in certain circumstances, there needs to be a better way. So crowdsourcing kind of lets you mainline innovation, go straight to the source, leverage the collective intelligence of humanity, which is really limitless almost. Organizations, I think, are really underestimating the power of people and the fact that no matter who you are, no matter what organization you work for, most of the smartest people work for somebody else.
Ken, this one's for you. Where do you see crowdsourcing as being underutilized?
Well, I mean, I want to echo what Christian was discussing. I think that we as organizations and companies maybe aren't the most efficient in tapping into the brilliance of the people that are in the office next to us, in field offices across the US or across the globe. It's a process to tap into a lot of the innovation and the brilliance that people inherently have. And I think that, while commercial industry is adopting, more and more ways to crowdsource internally incentivize people to be a part of solving, some of their problems, I'd still probably have to say the government, while it leans in to innovation, and there's amazing people in the public sector that are really trying to lead the way and do great things for this country, whether it's capability based or innovation driven, which can be process as well. But I think it's a bigger challenge to apply the innovation in the government setting than it is in the commercial world. It's a difficult process to take outcomes from innovation and turn them into sustainable programs. And they're still, early in terms of galvanizing their own workforce and giving them avenues to participate in some of the critical missions that they serve. That is because of the environments they work in, which sometimes limit, what can be shared. But I think if we could really tap into the everyday person like myself and everyone on this webinar to give them an avenue to express the things that they have internally already, the brilliance and the knowledge that they possess. And I think we're going to be better off as an economic force, but I think we'll be even better as a world population.
Where do you see the greatest impact?
I mean, I would say, how about the avoidance of extinction? We've invented this thing called the internet. The internet we've created many inventions, over our history. As I said, we're tool makers. What differentiates us from almost every other species is our ability to create, our ability to be creative, and the genesis of all that we do around innovation and creation is all that what's essentially human. And some of the inventions we create, they connect us. They create networks. Everything from the radio to telephone. Fast forward, and we've created the internet, which really is a first real platform that brings network effects to other inventions at scale. So now almost every invention that we create, has a network effect, or we can connect it to the network and give it a network effect. What that means is that our inventions are diffusing far faster. Network effects accelerate the impact of an invention, both positive and negative. We live in a marketplace, in a world where the rate of innovation is far faster. It's really exponential compared to what things were like before the internet. You just look around, you can see it. Our ability to create things is, going by this huge accelerated cycle. Every technology has both intended and unintended consequences. Global warming is an unintended consequence of fossil fuels. So how are we going to solve all of these problems? I think it's pretty obvious to most people that the old way of solving problems, which worked well in the linear kind of analog world, governments, traditional institutions, regulations, they're not keeping up. As soon as we get one thing solved, we've already moved on to something else. The only way for us to get on top of all of these problems before they overwhelm us is to use the internet as the problem-solving approach, which crowdsourcing is a huge part of that. If we can get together and work together using crowdsourcing to solve these problems, we're using network effects against the network effects that are driving these problems.
I'd love your thoughts just on what Christian just shared, the pace of innovation. I mean, you could be working on a technology and chances are there's probably somebody right behind you, literally right behind you, with something that's going to make your technology that you're about to launch obsolete. Can you give some thought or any specific examples of when you've had conversations with clients, the pace of innovation has really shown up powerfully?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's an interesting conundrum that young innovative companies face in terms of developing the next shiny, awesome widget. I've seen more companies who've developed amazing things, but they weren't solving a current problem. Sure that it's practical for a buyer that has an issue and you can solve it is critical. It's difficult to bring some of the cutting edge technologies that I've seen, and I've seen hundreds and hundreds of unique capabilities over the last 5 or 6 years, spoken with the executive teams and the chief technology officers of these companies, and it's a very interesting paradigm that we live in. And that's why I love, distributed problem solving and utilizing human beings across the globe, because most of the time we're going to get really interesting and practical ideas and solutions, ideation from the crowd and these ecosystems of solvers that maybe we've looked past. We're so focused on the pace of innovation, we're losing sight of, practical things that we execute today. And I think when it comes to cures for different diseases, we're thinking through clean water issues, a whole host of humanitarian issues. Just leveraging the people that are on the ground and their insights is extremely valuable. It isn't until recently, in my humble opinion, that technology is advanced in a way that we can allow everyone to be contributors to these really difficult and wicked problem sets that we face. Well, everything you're saying, Christian, really resonates from my perspective. I know we've had the chance to chat one or two times, and but when you think about the ability to bring millions of people into an environment, we have to solve the issues of scalability, platforms, and then something that I'm a huge proponent of. How do we apply, machine learning, deep learning, and now artificial intelligence elements into the back end of all the collection of all this brilliance and insights, and start to automate and refine the input that we're receiving so we can move faster to applying this great feedback to the problems that we care about.
There's a great show on Netflix called Diagnosis. They focus on people with these rare diseases that people can't figure out. Surprisingly, crowdsourcing fits into it. There's episodes where they're looking for, people with the same symptoms as in this rare disease, and then they find them and they share their information, and it leads to breakthroughs. There's just tremendous power in our ability to collaborate. If we're successful, I think, we'll look back at this kind of first, era of the internet, which was really dominated, I guess, by, negativity, by flame wars on discussion groups, complaining, using the internet almost in ways to focus on the problems. And because people aren't empowered to be able to collaborate, there's a lot of people on the planet that see these problems, but they feel like they have no way to participate.
What do you see as the most current innovation trend? What seems to really be kind of showing up regularly for you as a trend?
Well, I think innovation as a whole, you run into what I run into a lot now is virtual reality, augmented reality, hybrid, XR experiences, quantum computing, obviously UAVs, any advancements we can make in that domain. Of course, artificial intelligence is something that everyone brings up a lot, and it's a noisy space right now. AI. What I've seen is there are a limited number of companies that can do true artificial intelligence at this stage. There's been advancements, in the machine learning, deep learning space, but how do we move artificial intelligence to edge devices? That's going to be a huge thing because if you think about the sheer volume of data that we consume from edge nodes or edge devices, it's quite substantial. And so you need to be able to have learning agents on these devices that can help regulate not only consumption of data, but to get more near real time answers on things that we care about. From a crowdsourcing perspective, something that we've been focused on for, I want to say about 4 years, is the ability to integrate novel means to automate more of the crowdsourcing process on the back end of platforms. So, and that's a big thing to take a bite of because, when you think about crowdsourcing, it's a interesting blend of dissecting or deconstructing the right question that you want to provide to the crowd, so you get the right type of feedback and displayed in a way that's consumable and digestible for the crowd itself. To micro incentives, I inherently believe that all of us want to help others and make a difference. What we've learned through the way is you still have to align these micro incentives with self-interest. While people want to help, they also want to understand what does it mean to them, even if it's just a good continual feedback loop. That may be all that someone needs. But we've, asking hundreds and hundreds of people about the ability to provide their insights and brilliance, we've had uniform adoption of people saying, yes, absolutely, just tell me how. So to Christian's point, giving them the right tools to participate is huge. And then I think we're going to see exponential results in terms of really solving things that we've been grappling with for a while, and getting new perspectives from people who are actually dealing with some of the things on the ground level that we all care about. but we need to find a way to incorporate them into that process and make sure that we have ways to take bits and pieces of ideation that come into these platforms and be able to intelligently link them together using advanced analytics capabilities.
Where do you see the greatest level of resistance?
Organizations are already being stressed out by the rate of change in the market, what they're dealing with. I think specific to innovation, or one of the kind of essential competencies of any organization that kind of grows and scales and is successful is the ability to manage risk and avoid any big mistakes, any errors that impact customers, that impact financial performance and things like that. So it's inevitable that organizations basically develop an immune system against foreign, unproven, unknown things. And that immune system will attack innovations when they're first kind of being developed. Peter has a great quote, which is, the day before something's a breakthrough, it's a crazy idea. And I think we can all think through examples of innovations that at first were mocked or resisted or fought, and then only became self-evident as they succeeded. Elon Musk was a convenient example, but he was an outsider of the car business and created the Tesla, and it was mocked by by the industry, and he was attacked so relentlessly he actually broke down and cried on 60 Minutes. Now he's done more, in the last 100 years, he's done more to transform the automotive industry than any one person. I think there's just a lot of examples of the immune system kicking in on ideas when they're unproven. But if you kill these crazy ideas, you kill innovation. You also kill bad ideas, by the way. For every, one amazing innovation, there's going to be many, many failures. It's kind of inherent to innovation, that you can't innovate without failure. What we help organizations do is plug in the crazy innovation capabilities of the crowd and be able to allow the crazy ideas to flourish and develop, allow that innovation to occur, and then bring the proven ones and foster them and develop them internally, so that the organization can continue functioning, because without that immune system, it would be very difficult to function as a successful organization. And that model, we have a methodology called co-innovation, which is to help organizations do that. I don't know of how an organization that's dealing with change in the marketplace is going to be able to keep up without leveraging network effects on itself. So I really think that crowdsourcing in one form or another is an inevitable tool for most organizations.
How close do you see crowdsourcing to that tipping point?
I think we're at the tipping point right now. If you read a lot of articles that are out and about on the internet, people are really adopting the fact that we can truly create new paradigms using platforms like HeroX and others that are doing very unique things and allow individuals the ability to be participatory. I think inevitably we still deal with the issue of ROI. There aren't many organizations that have huge, for lack of a better term, sandbox type budgets where people can just innovate and iterate together without maybe some income statement impactation. And so there are ways to transition the ideation that is collected into things that are very practical and that can actually impact the business units. But you need a translator to help these organizations figure out what that looks like sometimes. Because a lot of people are still getting their arms around crowdsourcing. I remember like 2 years ago, if you brought it up, a lot of people would go, "Oh, do you mean crowdfunding?" I think technology has gotten us to a place where we can, legitimately touch millions of people virtually and allow them to create and make an impact in the very world that we live in. And something like that is just gives me chills just thinking about it, because it's critical to our humankind to allow all of us to contribute to the things that we are suffering from. That type of collaboration will bring us together in more ways than we can imagine right now, and eliminates what side of the aisle we sit on politically or what our backgrounds are. It kind of democratizes opportunity for all people.
When you walk into boardrooms, what do you recommend? Do you go towards more of a centralized or decentralized approach when it comes to incorporating crowdsourcing within a large organization?
Well, inherently, I use the term distributed problem solving, which is a decentralized reaching. In boardrooms and corporations, I think you've got to find the right mix between defining what innovation means. That word means a lot of things to a lot of people. So you really need to narrow down what does it mean to that organization, or what does it mean to their technology roadmap or the things that they're trying to achieve. And then once you have that kind of locked in, then it's a conversation about culture. So many organizations hire outside experts to come in and address some things that they're grappling with. I think more companies would be surprised than not at what they have in-house if they could find a mechanism to harness their employees' brilliance in a way that can be applied. People they want to help, even the companies they work for. In my travels as an executive, one of the biggest frustrations I've heard more than any other one is the fact that many people feel like there's no way for them to contribute, I guess, to the benefit of the organization. They feel like they're just kind of pigeonholed into a certain role, ideas. Maybe they're afraid to share them, but they want to. They want to roll up their sleeves and help the company and their coworkers. I think that's blending those two things together so you can see an ROI perspective with the culture and actually defining what innovation means to an organization is probably the pathway I would take to start gaining adoption inside some of the companies.
What are your thoughts on the impact of crowdsourcing internally within your team? And what have you seen as an example and some of the results?
Allowing everybody to participate in problem solving and using technology, we have these networks allow us to connect. We don't need the command and control, the hierarchical command and control to, give us direction anywhere near as we used to. So it's really about, just leveraging network effects. Have an organization that's develops kind of a good, method of understanding innovation and the creating kind of an innovation process, if you will, a life cycle. There are certain problems that are really ideal to solve within an organization. A lot of continual improvement work, a lot of optimization, a lot of waste, removing waste from corporate processes, rapidly responding to a client need. There's a lot of common use cases that are probably best suited doing internal to an organization. The risk on like the kind of the more like tech and breakthrough innovation side of things is the echo chamber effect. Tremendously bad ideas can form inside an organization in secret. There's lots of examples of spectacular missteps in the marketplace by companies who innovated secretly and then released the product in the market. I think there's also an argument to say that there's a form of innovation that's best to do collaboratively by bringing in a crowdsourcing approach internal to the company, plugged into open innovation and allowing team members, employees who are team members, maybe team leaders, to work with people that they've recruited using kind of structured crowdsourcing to make that model work. So that's something that we've really been working with a lot of companies to do.
We had an example of a client that, wanted to kind of test the waters with crowdsourcing. And it was a large financial services brand. They ran an internal crowdsourcing challenge. And the most powerful part of the story that really showed up for me was one of the winners actually gave their money away because what they wanted, what they got out of it more than the monetary was they loved that their organization wanted to hear what they had to say. They wanted to be heard. And I think there's such a strength and a power to that. And Ken, you've touched on this already as well, is, people want to contribute, but it's how do you find that avenue to be able to make that happen? And having powerful vehicles like platforms to be able to really democratize that process is really critical, right? And again, I think one of you has already spoken to this as well. I feel so aligned in this conversation. It's you're leveling the playing field. If you wanted to contribute an idea to NASA and you showed up to their front door, they'd say, that's great, Cal, but did you graduate from MIT, Harvard? You clearly don't meet the height restriction for an astronaut, so I'm sorry, you don't qualify. Whereas if they were to contribute to NASA, who, by the way, has been crowdsourcing for over a decade successfully, you can contribute. So you can say that you worked with NASA, really, because you contributed your idea. It doesn't matter what color, creed, religion, financial stability, whether you've got to go to school, whether you don't even own a pair of shoes and you live in a third world country. If you have connectivity, platforms that democratize this allow you the opportunity to contribute and actually impact the world. And that's something that, from my perspective, is one of the biggest impacts and powers of crowdsourcing. So, gentlemen, we're going to get into our final question, but before we do, just a friendly reminder for our audience. So please ensure you drop in any questions that are showing up for you in the chat, and we'll address them shortly. I know Liz has already messaged in the chat reminding you guys. And I think, Ken, you've already spoken to this already a little bit, but in business, it tends to come down to money. So what advice would you give organizations who are implementing a crowdsourcing strategy, specifically on what metrics they should put in place to ensure that they're either meeting or exceeding their goals? And again, you've talked about ROI a few times, so ultimately it's about ROI. How would you actually measure that?
Yeah, that's the biggest issue that we face in this field. Honestly, is what are the metrics? And I think I would start small with quick wins and quick victories that where an organization, including all of its employees, can see the outcome of a successful crowdsourcing exercise. What I mean by that is giving them very concrete, tangible things to create thinking around. And then once the organization has picked a few suggestions that they thought would be impactful, to assign a team to implement that into the organization, and see real outcomes on how it could impact the bottom line, or how it improves customer service, whatever the use case is. I think that's the only way we can start to see true outcomes that will keep corporations investing in this and making it sustainable. But everything you said regarding democratizing innovation for all is exactly right. And it's the primary reason why I'm so passionate about this space, because it truly does provide a pathway for hope, pathway to uplift people who may be struggling in a variety of ways. But that sense of pride and that sense of accomplishment you can get by having the mechanism to be participatory. There's a lot there that can be unpacked from a human perspective. And so, I'm really excited to see where crowdsourcing is going to take us, how it can be leveraged for a lot of good in this world.
I love that. Brilliance and amazing ideas live everywhere. And it's powerful when you actually see the process take place and the results that come out. So Christian, let's dig a little bit further into what Ken just shared a little bit. So when organizations do come to you and say, we want to implement this, Christian, but how do we know if it's going to be successful? How do I take this to my, chief innovation officer and prove to them that, this is how we calculate ROI? How do you, as a leader in this space, in this really innovative organization, moving forward and really forging ahead, what advice do you give them? What's the first or one or two steps that you suggest that they take?
Well, good question. So, I think we're in this transition of where crowdsourcing, and more specifically, organizations using crowdsourcing as a business tool. We're going through a transition, where it's been seen as a kind of a novelty, kind of a one-off type project, to now being seen as more of a mainstream tool in their toolkits. And part of that is, and what HeroX is really focusing on, is helping, make crowdsourcing, a a business tool that you don't need to be an expert in crowdsourcing to use.
Mm.
You know,
Mm.
all technologies are really made mainstream, by creating a great user experience.
Mm.
And in a, that applies just as much to business technology as anything else. So, our job is to make crowdsourcing a repeatable, easily trainable business, kind of method. And we're helping kind of spread that message by doing as many projects as we can, focusing on the effectiveness and the efficacy and
Mhm.
the efficiency, like the economics of crowdsourcing, and then using case studies and examples to share with others, so it can really be, people can start realizing that crowdsourcing, is very normal. It's
Mm.
very predictable. We can't. It's not a magic wand. Um, it's at the end of the day, if you think of crowdsourcing, who's behind crowdsourcing? Well, it's us, right? It's humans. It's
Yeah.
the same people you hire, right? It's the difference is, in whether you're prescriptive, whether you're telling everybody what to do, you're picking the person you're hiring, you're giving them their job, that kind of old school hierarchy approach, or whether you're being open, you're just saying, like, here's our problem. In many ways, crowdsourcing is everywhere. We just, once it works, we don't call it crowdsourcing anymore.
Mm.
Google, for example, just to use a really quick and convenient example, Google, when they started, there were already at least 50 search engines out there competing with each other and working on better algorithms. And Google struggled to raise money, because people, you were like, well, why do we need to get another search engine, and why are you going to be any better? Well, they used crowdsourced information,
Mm.
and fed it into their search engine. Now, which is now evolved into PageRank, and that was a crowdsourcing strategy. Now it's just called PageRank. It's just part of how it works.
Mm.
And so, I think, more and more as we do the crowdsourcing work, just be seen as a way of tapping into people.
Mm. Mm. Love that. That's great. So, gentlemen, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop our questions here, but I am going to circle back to you at the very end and ask you both for some final thoughts. So, give some thought to what that thought might be. But we have a couple of questions that we'll get through. So this one is for either of you. So Ken, why don't you take this one? I'm going to read it exactly as it's showing up here. So, not everyone would consider themselves creative and intelligent. Do you have any experiences or evidence that creative teams are better at generating innovation than strictly intelligent people?
Great question.
Mm-hmm.
I do have evidence, which is great, and I'm happy to share that briefly. So we extended crowdsourcing down to the K through 12 level, and pioneered a few things in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And one of the things that we observed in both of those exercises, one that went all the way down to the 5th grade level, was the creative problem solving that was occurring when you put student solvers in teams. So pieces of brilliance from each one were actually creating a larger solution set. And what was fascinating for us was a lot of the things that they were creating, most advanced thinkers would overlook, yet it solved the problem exactly. And so we had a 5th grade team come up with a whole new way of organizing approved applications that can be viewed by students across 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, which to many might seem like a very simple thing, but no one had thought of doing it. And the outcome from that was quite significant. Another great example is we put teams together of high school students, allowed them to collaborate in unique ways. And they actually came up with some solutions that some of our leaders in our national security apparatus had not thought of before. And so these were just, students who were passionate and that were able to kind of feed off of each other creatively, just by bringing different pieces and parts of experience and their and who they are inherently to create something much bigger than they might be able to do themselves.
Awesome. I love it, especially when you're able to tie it into an actual example. It takes what we're chatting about out of the conceptual and makes it more real. So thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Christian, is for you. How does someone find the crowd, in quotes, or those who are working on creative, innovative solutions?
So we're all 2 clicks away from each other, right? So, we estimate there's in let's say the knowledge working, space. So knowledge work, thinking for a living, which is what HeroX is focusing on. We estimate there's 900 million addressable solvers globally, and that number is growing quickly. And so, there's a lot of techniques around, getting the right things in front of the right people. Our hope is that, HeroX becomes the social network where users will create accounts, and just like on other social networks, they go on to, see their news feed, to get their, to be able to curate their flow of information. And so users, like potential solvers, will be able to find projects they're interested in. Right now, we specialize in a targeted analytics approach where we recruit crowd off our platform. So we go out and we look through the 900 million users that are out there and use a number of techniques around, spreading the word, mostly related to, getting in front of the people that know the people so that they can forward the message, share the message, spread the message. That diffusion is powerful because we're not trying to sell somebody. We're not trying to win a vote. We're providing access to opportunity. The essence of crowdsourcing is that, the people hire the projects, or, the companies don't hire the people. The people pick the projects. It's a reversal of that approach. And that's really in its power is that open and flexibility. And I just want to go back to the previous question real quick, because I think we could do an entire episode on just that question. It's a really interesting and profound question. But the quick version I'll share is that, everybody's a genius at something. Everybody who's born on this earth has one or more talents that make them stand out. And I think, one of the, kind of most important things that people can do is, figure out a way to make money, doing what they love doing. And we live in a time where we're all 2 clicks away. And if we can create these liquid marketplaces that are global, we can create an environment where, you can develop your love into and your talent, into, a career, or getting good at gigs in that specific area. And somebody out there is going to want to pay you to do that stuff. And so I think that's really the opportunity to do it. It's not about, kind of a conceptual, are you creative, are you intelligent? Everybody is a genius at something. Not everybody is a genius in knowledge work. There's some people whose passion is farming, and good news is we need to eat. So, there's other, places where, people will find work. We're focused on knowledge work. because it's really what's growing the economies, and it's centered around this global internet that's creating these amazing network effects. I just think there's a whole world there. There's a lot of learned helplessness, and people out there that feel stuck. They're stuck because the world hasn't given them the right opportunities. And I'll just say one last thing real quick. If you imagine that if you could walk in, this is for the young people, if you could just imagine you could walk in any company and you could take any job you wanted, like any job, and you could just start doing it, right? Nobody would get in your way. And it's real simple. If you do a good job, right, then you get paid for it.
Yeah.
If you suck at it, you don't get paid for it,
no.
Right? But you can walk into any company, do any job, and try it out. And hey, maybe you find something, you suck at it, but you're determined, and you practice, and you get good at it, and you get paid for it. That's kind of the kind of the end game, if you will. If we can make crowdsourcing, truly mainstream universal, that's kind of what it'll look like at the end game. And I think that would, just change everything for us.
That was so eloquently put. So I'm gonna take that as your final thought, if I may.
Yes.
And Ken, I'm gonna circle back to you now. In 30 seconds, I acknowledge you're right at time, but I would still love just any final thoughts that you have that you wanted to share today.
Well, I think Christian captured the key essence of what I would want to share with anyone of any age, which is we're all brilliant in our own way. And we should not let things in this world dictate or put limits around that. And I think crowdsourcing is going to change the way that we interact together, but change the way that we provide opportunities for all people. I agree with Christian 100% that new economies will be born out of the union and intersection of all of these wonderful ideas and the knowledge and the past experiences that people can share together. And it's going to create whole new ways for us to be successful together that transcends positions that we may take, whether it's politically or from a religious perspective. I think at the end of the day, all of us want to figure out new ways on how we can be co-collaborators for good. And I think that that crowdsourcing is going to be the mechanism to finally help us get there.
Love that. Well said. So on that, Ken, listen, we really appreciate you taking the time out of your really busy schedule today to participate in our webinar and offer your insights and your experience. For those of you who are attending our webinar today, if you'd like to learn more about how you can utilize the power of the crowd, reach out to us directly. We'll be sending a follow-up email, which will include our contact information. And with that, on behalf of Ken, Christian, and myself, thanks so very much for taking the time to join us. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks so very much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.